Test. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to attend tonight's meeting. For the record, it's April 4th, 2024, and the time is 6:31. I'll begin with the roll call. So, Council, when I call your name, please say here or present. Mayor Maxton.
Here.
Councilmember Stroop.
Here.
Roden.
Here.
Alvera.
Here.
Kerner.
Here.
Parker.
Here.
And Menchow.
Present.
With 7 members of council present, a quorum is declared.
Thank you, Christina. And we do have some visitors with us here tonight. We have 4 Cub Scouts from the Arrow of Light. Is that the right way to describe it? And I'd like to ask them if y'all would come up here and join me. And would y'all help me lead the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes.
Ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, guys. Thank y'all for being here. Who'd I miss? Did I? Then it was you. All right. They're meeting one of their requirements, well, 2 of the requirements today, and part of that was sitting through a council meeting that I know y'all were really excited for, so thank y'all for being here. With that, we'll move on to citizens to be heard. We did not have anybody sign up for citizens to be heard. Is there anybody here tonight that didn't get an opportunity to sign up that would like to speak? Okay. And we do have a presentation listed on the agenda for tonight, and it was to present the 5-year service award to Brian Lejeune. Brian couldn't make it to the meeting tonight, so we're going to defer this item to the next meeting, April 18th, when he can be here to receive his award. And with that, we'll move on to our consent agenda. We have 3 items on the consent agenda tonight. Approval of the March 21st, 2024 regular city council meeting minutes. Second is approval of Councilmember Stroop's absence from the March 21st, 2024 regular city council meeting. And third, approval of Councilmember Munchau's absence from the March 21st, 2024 regular city council meeting. Is there any council member that would like to pull any of these items from consent to consideration? With that, could I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
From Chesley in a second.
Second.
I'll give it to Scott. I think he spoke first. And with the motion on the table to approve the consent agenda, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda is approved. Thank y'all. We have 2 consideration items on the agenda tonight. First is the consideration and possible action approving a resolution authorizing the execution of an agreement with IWC Oil and Refinery, LLC for on-site fuel delivery. Turn it over to you, Clayton.
Sounds good. Good evening. I'm Clayton Holscher. I'm procurement manager with the finance department. So back in September, City Council approved the purchase and installation of an above-ground fuel tank to be here, located here at the city campus. And the reason for that was just for to improve emergency preparedness and operation resiliency, just so we can make sure that we have fuel for all of our vehicles should need be, and to have that convenience factor right here as well. We're actually in the process of having that done. We should have that here in the near future. We've had our contractor come and lay the foundation for it, and so here in the near future, that tank will be arriving. So that particular agreement was only for the construction of the tank. Tonight's agenda item is just for a provider to deliver fuel to us. So in order to do that, we issued a request for proposals. We ended up receiving 4 different proposals, and we ranked them based on their qualifications and experience, how they would approach the project, and the price. So after we evaluated the proposals, we selected IWC Oil and Refinery, LLC. They're a company that's established in 2010, and they have a headquarters here in San Antonio. And they were the highest ranked respondent. The pricing methodology that we used is based on the Oil Price Information Service Report. It's commonly referred to as OPIS, and it's an industry standard report that basically provides a wholesale, an average wholesale price for the market that we are in. So what we did is we asked the vendors to provide a price based on a reference point. We used what is your markup if the price is $3 per gallon? And that way everybody could bid on the same thing. So this agreement that we receive, or that we have with IWC, it includes an 18-cent per gallon markup on both the gasoline and diesel for the wholesale price. So that's not retail, that's just the wholesale price that we have. So this will support our strategic plan action item to implement a fuel station for the city fleet vehicles. It'll improve our emergency preparedness and operational resiliency. And then we also follow our procurement guidelines by issuing a request for proposal. As far as the budgetary impact, it'll be purchased on an as-needed basis. This agreement, there's not a minimum or maximum amount associated with it. It's just to get this contractor in place, and then we can call out orders for gasoline and diesel when we need it. Worked with the city attorney on the agreement that's included on the agenda, and it's been reviewed and approved. So the proposed motion that we have tonight is to approve a resolution authorizing the execution of an agreement with IWC Oil and Refinery LLC for on-site fuel delivery, expenditure of the required funds, and execution of all applicable documents by the city manager. And having said that, I'm happy to answer any sort of questions. Yes.
Quick question.
Sure.
Going forward, when we need to get this refilled, is it going to be, is that what we're going to use, same people? Do we kind of set up an ongoing terms and conditions, or do we continue to look for other people? How does that work?
It'll be for this particular vendor. And so after, if we were to approve this and execute this agreement, we would meet with them at first and try to best forecast something like monthly so they can coordinate it with all of the other deliveries that they have. If we needed fuel sooner than that, we've got it in the agreement, and we issued in the request for proposal that within 2 days that would need to be delivered. So we'll be monitoring it. We'll know the fuel levels that we're at, so we can make a call out if we need to. But we're gonna try to project as best we can before we get started.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, essentially approving this, we get the first fill, and then kind of we're trying to fill it out, if you want to call it that, or move forward with
It'll be
future.
it'll be for this vendor to provide fuel for the year, basically, for us. We have it written for 1 year with optional renewals. There's not a minimum or maximum amount that we're ordering. There's nothing that precludes us from going and getting gasoline elsewhere, but the intent behind this is to establish that relationship and have them provide fuel for us.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
How big is our tank?
It's 1,000 gallons of gas and 500 for diesel. It's going to be a split compartment tank that we ordered.
Gotcha, thank you.
Anybody else? Is there anybody here tonight that has any questions reference this item? Okay. Then can I get a motion to approve a resolution authorizing the execution of an agreement with IWC Oil and Refinery LLC for on-site fuel delivery, expenditure of the required funds, and execution of all applicable documents by the city manager?
I so move.
Second.
Laura and Keith and Chesley. Any other discussion from council? With the motion on the table, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is approved. Thank you, Clayton.
Thank you.
The next consideration item that we have on the agenda tonight is a consideration and possible action to approve a resolution for the Fair Oaks Ranch Municipal Court to adopt a confidentiality policy and agreement. And Ricardo.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. My name is Ricardo Bautista. I'm the Court Administrator for the Municipal Court. So recently, well, not recently, but on August 25th, 2023, the Supreme Court of Texas made an amendment to our Texas Rule of Judicial Administration 7. The main amendment applies to our court as far as we have to adopt a confidentiality policy and agreement for our staff. Not that the court wasn't already practicing those policy. It's just that now the state or the Supreme Court requires us to actually pass or adopt a confidentiality policy and agreement for the staff. There is some training and implementations that we have to do by May 1st, 2024. The training consists of regular seminars that we already attend that covers those trainings. I myself will go over the policy with all the staff that's necessary, and I will ask for help from the city attorney to make sure that we cover all our bases as far as what this confidentiality policy covers. Like I said, it's not something we're not used to, but it needs to be passed now by legislation or by the Supreme Court.
Questions? Pretty straightforward. This is just lays out a policy for our court administrative personnel on how to provide confidentiality with all the information that goes through your office.
Yes, we as clerks or as administration are in charge of making sure that none of this information is released without, proper follow through as far as what can and cannot be released. Like I said, we already do that. Most of our requests for our court are handled through PIRs, public information requests, because it's just a lot of the information that we have cannot be released, especially to even if the wife is calling for the husband's ticket, I cannot really give them information. Like I said, these are policies that we already follow. It's just that before it wasn't required for us to actually have a policy and send it into the Supreme Court for them to have it as a file. It used to be more for district courts, statutory courts, but now they've included us on there, so we're just following through, making sure we're in compliance.
Okay. Questions?
The policy is written already conforms with what the Supreme Court's requiring?
Yes, we actually based ours off of the sample that they provided.
Okay.
Question? Anybody else? Any questions from anybody here tonight about the confidentiality policy? Confidentiality policy. Okay. Then with that, could I get a motion to approve a resolution adopting a confidentiality policy and agreement for the Fair Oaks Ranch Municipal Court?
So moved.
From Emily.
Second. Third?
I think Ruben. Yeah, Ruben.
Leslie gets the third.
Any other
again.
discussion from council? You were quick, just not quick enough. Any other, with the motion on the table, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is approved. Thank you, Ricardo.
Thank you, Council.
For tonight's agenda, with the approval of council, I'd like to remove or move the reports from staff and committees up to this portion of the agenda. Is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
And we have one report. It's the semi-annual report from the Capital Improvements Advisory Committee. And Paul Mabin is here the chairman of that committee, to provide the report.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm Paul Mabin. As the mayor said, I'm chairman of the CIAC, the Capital Improvements Advisory Committee. We had a meeting in March, and the report for the summary of the meeting is found on page 99 and 100 in your packets. So it's pretty far back in there. We operate under the Local Government Code 395. Normally, that doesn't make any difference, but what that 395 requires that a review be performed every 5 years for the capital improvements plan for land use assumptions, and then going from that is to the impact fees. That 5-year date comes up in March of next year, 2025. So we need to do some work this year to prepare for that. If you look at the assumptions, I guess, we've been watching trends, and the trend for construction material costs is trending up. It has been for a number of years. And we also see that the forecast for the number of homes that are being built in Fair Oaks is trending down. Both of these will impact the impact fee calculations that is coming up. It is recommended that this year that we update the water wastewater master plans just in preparation for the impact fees that are coming up. That'll take a little bit of work in there. There's been one significant change, and I think everybody's aware of that, and that's with the wastewater water treatment plant. What was in the impact fee calculations, the capital improvements in 2019, 2020 was about $25 million to build a greenfield, a brand new plant. Since then, there's been work going on. We've gone to what we call a brownfield plant. We're actually expanding the existing wastewater treatment plant, and we're dividing it into two phases, so two big changes there. Phase one of that is in design at the present time. It's estimated to cost about $5 million. Phase two will come later. Current impact fees that we're using right now were done on the basis of a Freeze and Nichols report in 2019. We currently need that or a similar report done this year in preparation for an early 2020 relook at the impact fees. What staff is going to do is come back with a recommendation for an budget add for this year using impact fee funds that are available at this time. That's probably the one big takeaway from this meeting for us. Any questions?
You said you're using the 2019 report. Do we not have any data, I guess, closer to where we're at?
Not anything in that level of detail. So
So how do we go about getting that?
we employ Freeze Nichols. We go out and employ Freeze Nichols or a similar company.
Typically do that every 5 years.
Every
Yeah,
phase?
every 5
Okay.
years is,
That's kind of a normal thing. So it
Yes.
seems like maybe currently we're getting close to needing to do that?
we're estimating we need to start out in September-ish
Okay.
to have it ready for, September, have it ready for March.
Anybody else? Good question. Anybody else? Anybody here have questions for Paul Maben? Did you get everything you needed? And
Got everything we needed.
thanks, Paul. That completes the reports that we had from staff tonight. We do have 4 workshop items on the agenda tonight. First is the solid waste franchise agreement. And I believe Carol, our Assistant City Manager, is going to lead us through this.
Good evening, Council. Carol Van Zandt, Assistant City Manager. What we have tonight for your discussion is Republic Services' proposed renewal terms for the solid waste services. Just by way of background very quickly, our current agreement expires September 2024. In February of this year, City Council considered options in providing services for 2024 fiscal year through 25 and subsequent years. During that discussion, Council decided to exercise its option to renew the current agreement, inclusive of negotiating contract amendments with Republic Services. During our discussions with Republic Services, they noted some major factors affecting its operational costs, which is shown on page 42, 43 of your packet. Some of those effects were the historic high inflation rates, the recent pandemic, increases in operational costs. So to address these, as noted on page 43 of your packet tonight, Republic Services is proposing a 10-year term with a 3-year gradual stair-stepping of monthly base rates. Years 4 through 10, the rate would be based on the applicable Department of Labor Consumer Price Index with no cap. And they are also requesting a smaller brush pile size be considered during our biannual bulk brush events. Right now, the size is 15 by 6 by 6. We've not discussed the actual reduction of size. Now, Tom Armstrong, the General Manager of Municipal Services, is with us here tonight, and if he has that answer, I'm sure he'll be happy to provide it to you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Tom Armstrong with Republic Services. Yeah, what we're looking at on the brush piles is we're looking at somewhere between 5 and 10 cubic yards. What we found out is that 85% of all households in Fair Oaks put out 5 cubic yards or less. So we have a smaller amount of people that are putting out a lot. That is causing a bigger cost into the program that everyone's paying for a smaller number of people. So that's kind of what's at the crux of it. But yeah, so we are looking to.
So we're a diverse city, and there are sections of the city that rely on those brush pickups since we can't burn, right? It's just something that we can't do here. So that's going to be a problem.
Yeah. So our thinking on this, and I don't think we've brought it up to Scott and Carol yet, but having the people with more pay more. So if we have a smaller limit for the brush that can be put out, the people that have more call in, get it on the schedule, pay X amount to get more picked up, and then they're kind of paying their fair share instead of people in garden homes that don't really have a lot of brush paying a higher rate to cover all of that.
We're going to agree to disagree there.
Yeah. So if we're looking at 15 by 6 by 6, which is, I think she said, our normal, what are we looking to cut it to?
Well, that's 20 cubic yards, so in half, basically.
Trying to say that in a nice way.
It's really a tough situation
Well,
because
so you have the people though in the front of the neighborhood, let's just say that don't really have the trees and the brush and all the things that come with that. And then you have the back 40, which both of us obviously live in, where you have, I mean, in the last freeze, I'm gonna be honest, I mean, I had an insane amount of brush. But we pay what they pay, and we all kind of have worked together to become what it is we are with Fair Oaks. And so by limiting this to a very small amount and making certain people pay, it's something very different than what we've done in the past. And so I feel like I have, yeah, and so I feel like I have an issue with that because you can't, as we all know, you can't put Fair Oaks in a one little box. You know, we always say it. We're unique. We're all these adjectives that we want to be, right? But at the same time, you can't put us in this box, and so it's a struggle for me for that.
I can put Fair Oaks into and compare it to is Garden Ridge. They're similar communities in that there's large lots with a lot of canopy and tree cover. Garden Ridge pays for the great majority of the brush. They have community collection events on, I think it's 3 weekends a month where they have open tops available at the city yard and everyone brings their stuff in. But the whole reason this came up is that we're looking for options. Our costs have gone up significantly, and we're faced with the tough prospect of coming to the city tonight, which I wasn't looking forward to, and asking for a very large price increase. You know, I would love nothing more than to say everything's fine, let's keep going. But we were looking at a very large price increase just to get us to some acceptable return. Right now, it's underwater. We're losing money as it is now. Part of it is a bad decision on our part. When we negotiated this agreement in the past, we agreed to a 3% cap on the annual price increase. And in our defense, the indexes weren't moving. They weren't going up. They weren't going down. They were pretty stagnant at about between 2 and 2.5% per year. And now all of a sudden we're seeing 8 and 9%. We're capped at 3, so it's putting us in a hole that's compounding every year.
Is there a way to make it where, and I don't know the answer to this. So instead of being by household, say, we multiply it out. We have however many households by X number, whatever y'all want to do. And then give us a top amount, whatever that amount is, right? And then instead of holding each household to a certain amount, we can say, hey, y'all picked up X number. We are agreed to X number. You're over by, 300 yards. I'm just making stuff up. And then we get charged for that extra. Does that make sense?
And that,
Is that something
That-
that
that's-
could
Like
work?
how we did at after the freeze.
Yeah, I guess it's just the per household thing because we're so different. Where Laura lives and where everybody else lives, they're on the golf course, so they have 0 trees. Whereas I have large amounts of trees.
Yeah.
And so is there a way to cover that?
yeah, well, and that's a little, Ms. Kerner, were you wanting to say something?
Yes, but you guys finish your conversation. My question is for the mayor.
Well, and actually, what we're proposing is a smaller limit so that those people that have more are going to need to call in and make arrangements to pay for, yeah.
Mayor? Are we negotiating the contract here, or are we just
No.
deciding if we're going to move forward with the negotiations with them, or if we're just going to put out our RFP?
Yeah.
I believe that.
Okay, because I don't think they're open for negotiating what they've already presented to staff. This is what they've presented. We either like it and move forward with it, or we go out for RFP, or we pick somebody else. Is that the motions?
Well, there's not even a motion. What
Just to
Carol's going to do the presentation. She has 3 options that she's going to present us and really wants, from our perspective, which option they'd like to pursue.
Got it. Okay.
And we are open to any options, any ideas that come forward. We're not just set in stone and saying, this is it, and, take it or leave it.
Well, it's a conversation for you and staff.
Correct.
And something that'll be brought back to us at a later
Right.
time
Yep.
for this discussion. Yes.
So thank you for that. Yes, our options that we were proposing to you is that if you desired us to continue negotiating with Republic Services, we can do so. If there's something specific you would like us to continue negotiating, let us know. You also have the option of ending negotiations and requesting staff go out for RFP. So that is correct.
Have y'all given a proposal to the city already, or y'all just still in discussion? Where are you?
We've had meetings where we've had
Okay.
some conversations.
So we don't have a firm proposal
We
yet?
have an initial proposal.
Okay.
But Carol, from y'all's standpoint, really, Republic Services has come back and said they will not honor the next 3%.
They do not wish to renew at that 3% cap. Correct.
And that was really the direction that we'd gone before. And so now with that on the table, what you're coming back to us and looking for is further direction on where we go, and have provided us the 3 options. 1, to continue negotiations with
Correct.
Republic Service. 2, to go out for a RFP for other services. Or do we want to provide some vendor specifically from council that we would like for you to go out and take a look at?
Correct.
And I'll just say it from my standpoint, I'm not in favor of option 3, which really leaves option 1 and option 2, from my standpoint.
Well, and I appreciate staff bringing this back to us, because I think one of the reasons why we made the previous discussion, the previous decision, was we thought renewing with the contract we had was something we wanted to do. But now that there's no way we could renew it in the way that it was currently written, that is what I'm hearing. The question is, do we continue negotiations because we think we can get to something we might like, or do we just bring out an RFP and see what else is, what everyone is saying?
Right.
Okay. I think at this point, I'm leaning towards option 2 if we're bringing opinions in. I think the only reason we didn't go with the RFP before, because we were still just on a renewal period.
Right.
I agree with Laura.
If we were to go with, go out for a request for proposal for others to bid on this, does that end the current negotiations that we have right now with Republic Services?
Yes.
Would they be part of the RFP process?
I would think they would submit an RFP, yes.
They would absolutely be open to do
Yeah.
so, yes.
It's open to all vendors.
And if we continued the negotiation process, and I believe it was 2 months, you believe that we would go through, if we continue the negotiations with Republic Services based on the stair-step methodology that you provided, and we would have something to review within 2 months, say we went with option 1.
Correct.
And at that time, if we decided we did not want to do option 1, would we still have time to go out for RFP for?
April. We would have to come back to you, I would say, to be safe, the first week of May, so that we can meet all the deadlines with the RFP. Because we would also like to present you with a draft RFP before we actually publish it. So I would say May. We would have to come to you with negotiated.
5 months.
Because if you did not like that second negotiation, yes, then the RFP, we're starting to squeeze the time frame and the transition period.
Challenge is the transition
In
time.
the
If you're talking a
transition.
couple months for an RFP discussion, selection.
Correct.
If there is a new provider transition to that you're looking at, a 5 to 6 month period. You can squeeze it into 4, but it's a process. I will say that, at least in our discussion so far, Republic has been good about ensuring us that they won't leave us hanging, so to speak, if we go a little bit past October 1. But that October period is our target for installing a new contract, whether it's with Republic or a new vendor.
Really what I was asking, if we looked at option 1 and option 1 failed, would we have a time after that to get to option 2 and get that implemented by the end of the year? And really what I'm hearing is it could possible, but probably not the preferred way to do it. Is that
That's fair.
That's fair, yes.
okay? Keith?
No, I think, Scott, you hit on the transition thing, because I know how much time it takes to roll over if you transition out from an existing vendor. So I think that it seems tight to try to do 2 things, like have continued negotiation and do an RFP after that. So I think the RFP seems like the most logical thing. Plus, it gives us for the city, it gives us a basis to know what's happening in the market too, because we don't know. We've had this contract for some time now, right? And you guys most likely would be a bidder. You'll bid. So I think that seems to be the right direction.
Okay.
Can I add one thing, and this isn't anything I'm arguing in our favor, it's just information for your decision-making. Since the pandemic, lead times on garbage trucks is long. Used to, if we had a month or 2, that was plenty of time, and it's between nine months to a year. So if you select another vendor, it'd have to be somebody that already has those assets in place. Not saying there's not companies out there that don't, but it's something to keep in mind. I think there's probably some independents that are smaller that would be hard pressed to meet those kind of lead times. But it doesn't make it exclusive to us. There's other companies out there that can do it.
So Carol, from our discussion tonight, I think what you're really looking for is an indication from council which option that we'd like to pursue.
Correct.
And option 2?
Yeah, I think I've been saying this for a while.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And we hope you guys bid on it, too.
We certainly will.
I want to hear what they have.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Thanks, Tom, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Next on the workshops is the Tree Mitigation Fund Policy and Oak Wilt Program Workshop. And is Kelsey here? Oh, you're there. You're hiding behind the podium.
Where did she come from?
Good evening, Council. So back in October, it's been a little bit, but back in October, staff held a workshop with everyone to discuss a proposed mitigation fund. From the guidance y'all provided to us at that time, staff drafted a proposed policy to establish a tree mitigation fund, as well as a few programs or initiatives that the city may use funds received from the fee in lieu of mitigation, which is fee in lieu of mitigation, if you remember, is a fee that development or redevelopment projects pay to the city for the removal of trees whenever they're unable to mitigate them on site. And so part of this workshop, we have provided 2 attachments. The first one is the draft tree mitigation fund policy, and then the second attachment B is the Oak Wilt program. As part of this workshop, staff's requesting direction from City Council regarding these 2 items. Based on feedback received, the policy and program may be brought back to Council for consideration and possible action. So moving on to attachment A, which is the tree mitigation fund policy. Does anyone have any questions before I go through the various highlights of the policy? Or can I just jump right in? Okay. So the purpose statement really sums up what we're trying to achieve through this policy, which is to appropriately use funds provided to the city through the fee in lieu of mitigation for tree removal as defined in the UDC. And so this policy is made up to achieve several goals, which include to support an Oak Wilt program, to provide funding for landscaping, tree planting, and maintenance on public land, to provide free tree or plant giveaways as part of an Arbor Day celebration or other city events, as well as assist in funding various city projects, apologies on the typo, including but not limited to capital improvements, drainage improvements, or storm or brush cleanup. So going on to the organization structure, this goes over specific responsibilities for certain key players when acting in the fund. Starting with the city manager. So the city manager is responsible for approving the fund, reviewing recommendations, as well as allocating funding and providing additional support staff as needed. City manager is also responsible for the final review and approvals of all proposed policy directives. The manager of engineering services is responsible for the promotion and implementation of the city's tree mitigation fund objectives in the operation and maintenance of current and future programs, as well as overseeing the initiation of actions and budgeting resources. The environmental program manager is responsible for the implementation and day-to-day management of the fund and its programs within, and shall function as the project manager. Other employees and staff are responsible for assisting the fund by providing input, as well as helping promote program initiatives and events to the public. So going on to the identification of funding projects / programs, this is where the meat of the policy really comes into line. Starting with the tree mitigation fund itself, this is a reserve fund that is used to that is established to collect and deposit the fee in lieu mitigation payments into. These funds that are deposited are subject to appropriation through the normal budgeting cycle or through a budget amendment. These budget items may be created to allocate and capture expenses related to various programs and initiatives underneath the tree mitigation fund. And so this policy will establish 3 expense line items right off the bat. All 3 of these expense line items will be annually allocated through the annual budgeting cycle. The first one is the Oak Wilt program. This program or this line item will be used exclusively for Oak Wilt management, and this is attachment B. We'll discuss it further whenever we get to that portion. The second one is tree and landscaping protection, self-explanatory, used for tree and landscaping throughout the city on public lands, on public properties, excuse me. The third one, also self-explanatory, it's going to be used for city-approved events. This includes, but is not limited to, Arbor Day celebrations, as well as free plant tree or slash tree giveaways, or other ways to get the public involved. Lastly, additional line items may be created and allocated for specific projects or programs as determined by staff with city council approval. So based off of attachment A, the tree mitigation fund policy, does anyone have any questions, concerns, comments?
I had a quick question, Kelsey. So when we talk about it's the item D, my thoughts were is when we talked about this initially, that all the funds that we received in lieu of would be used for some specific tree landscaping type of event. But when we put up there specific events, projects for the city, that kind of leaves it open-ended.
So back at the workshop, we presented 4 options. Staff recommended, and what we heard from council is option 4, which is to implement an Oak Wilt program, as well as use these funds for tree and landscaping specific projects, but also to have the option where we could use these funds for capital improvements or for storm damage cleanup and other events like that. So though we can create other line items, these do have to be approved by city council.
Okay.
I've got a question on B, on the tree and landscape protection. I mean, I guess this is direct to the city manager. We have funds right now that we use for landscape and maintenance of public properties and part of our budget process, right?
Small line, primarily for the city campus, but yes.
Mainly the city campus. So this wouldn't be replacing anything out of the general fund. In other words, this wouldn't be relieving funds that we're using already.
That's not the intent.
Not the
no. Like I said, we have a
intent,
small
yes.
landscaping budget here, and then our vegetation mitigation, tree trimming essentially is done through existing, obviously staff salaries and equipment that we purchase already. So
Okay.
I don't see this supplanting anything in the current budget.
Okay. I just didn't want it to take away, to take it out of replace the general fund, really bypassing the intent of the policy, just to be sure we had.
And like Kelsey said, this would be set up as a new reserve item in the general fund, so it would have to be appropriated by council.
Fair enough.
Regardless.
Okay, thank you.
Do the fees go into like one pool, and then depending on what it's needed for, it gets approved as needed basis, or would like Oak Wilt get a certain percentage potentially allocated and vice versa?
So all of the fees would go into the tree mitigation fund, and
Okay.
from there, council would appropriate a specific amount toward each of these line items.
Okay.
Any other questions? No? Okay. So moving on to attachment B. So this is the Oak Wilt program. The Oak Wilt program was drafted to incentivize and assist in Oak Wilt treatment throughout the city limits. This will be done through a reimbursement process that is on a first-come, first-served basis, and will only be processed when funds are available. Specific guidelines or eligibility requirements are in place. The first one being that properties seeking reimbursement must have oak wilt found on their property or be in close proximity to an infected property where there is a risk where oak wilt could go onto their property, as determined by a certified arborist. Additionally, all treatment must be carried out by a certified arborist. On top of that, an application must be provided with supporting documentation, which includes an invoice and a treatment plan, no later than 30 days after treatment. Any questions so far? No? Okay. Services eligible for reimbursement include injectable therapeutic and preventative treatment, the removal of diseased red oak trees, and trenching to contain oak wilt centers. The reimbursement amount is set to be up to 50% of the total cost of eligible services, with a maximum payout of $1,500 per fiscal year per property. So the reimbursement process is fairly straightforward. Staff will gather all information from the applicant and ensure that requirements are met. After that, they will determine the eligible reimbursement amount. Once that is completed, the packet will go to the Manager of Engineering Services for final review and approval. If approved, reimbursement will go out within 30 days of approval. Does anyone have any questions about the Oak Wilt program? Yes.
Out of curiosity, you said something about they have to come in. Can one person come in and do it, say, 5 years in a row and get all the reimbursement? Does that make sense? How do we, I guess, spread it out? Better idea.
So it's on I think I understand what you're saying. So it's on, applicants are eligible for a yearly payout as determined by, of up to $1,500. So they would have to complete the treatment. We would pay out the $1,500 or up to $1,500. It's 50% of total thing. And so if next year, say that Oak Wilt is on their property.
Treatment.
I'm sorry?
Does it have to be a different treatment?
It does not. It depends on, so if it's a large property and Oak Wilt is going through yearly, and so the first year they'd like to treat the trees that have Oak Wilt, they can apply for this and get up to 50%. And then under the guidance of a certified arborist, the arborist says that next year would be a good time to do preventative treatment of their trees to help prevent the spread continuing. And they go through an arborist and do that, then they would be able to apply the next year.
So they can continue to apply? I guess that's my question.
Okay, yes.
So I can get up to $1,500 multiple times as long as I'm using a certified arborist and treating and continuing to apply, either pre-treating or post-treating, depending on what my circumstances are.
So long as the certified arborist has a treatment plan, and that is they're under the guidance of a certified arborist, they have the best intentions when it comes to treatment and the processes for that.
And you're paying half each year.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, well, fair. At least half.
I like the program, the way it's set up, and we do have Oak Wilt centers throughout the city, in the fairways, on Post Oak Trail, Silver Spur area. And part of this would be, else mentioned it, is to promote and incentivize people to get out and start treating the oak wilt that we have throughout our community and slow the spread or even stop the spread. And so in some cases, oak wilt just continues to spread without treatment. And so with this program, I believe the intent would be to publicize it and to incentivize others to access it.
Correct.
To start slowing or stopping the spread of oak wilt in the city.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Do we have funds now in the tree mitigation fund at all yet? Have we had any payments into that fund?
So we do have, I don't have an exact number, but I calculated it briefly this morning, and we currently have about $160,000.
Okay.
So it'd be ready to go once set up.
Once we
program.
once we go through the budgeting, once you all go through the budgeting cycle and allocate these funds, starting October 1, we would be able to start issuing or accepting applications.
Okay.
So I think one of the things I saw that, I mean, really everybody was in agreement with the policy that you've laid out. I don't think there were any issues with it. And I think, unless y'all, any concerns? And I think the other guidance that you were looking for was the 50% as part of the Oak Wilt program was 50% good and was $1,500 good.
Correct. Yeah, we're good with that. Just as a little bit of background, right now, as part of the tree and landscaping maintenance ordinance, whenever oak wilt is treated within the city, arborists are supposed to provide me with documentation that it is happening, and so I get to see invoices that are coming in now. And so what I've seen in the past year or so is that the cost of treatment for some of these properties is anywhere from $500 to $2,000. So that's kind of where the $1,500, the 50% came from, is that historically it's somewhere in that range, and so 50% of that what is doable, yeah, and it would help. Depending on how many funds are allocated to this, we potentially could assist many properties.
I know I had my trees treated, and it was in that range. It was in the $1,000 to $2,000 range, but it was approaching my property because I'm near a center over there off of Pimlico and the Parkway. And I had the arborist come back out this year, 2 years after I had them treated. And he said my trees went through and got oak wilt, but survived because of the treatment. So my trees are rock solid. They don't need to be treated again. So I think to maybe answer maybe Chesley's question is that from what I understand, and I'm not an arborist, is that once they treat them, then that tree's good. It doesn't have to be retreated so that somebody couldn't come back every year and get the same trees treated. I think that's how it works.
Is there a scenario where someone from the city, such as yourself, might disagree with the opinion of a certified arborist? Is that in there to where?
Certified arborists, especially those who do oak wilt, there's actually they have to be an oak wilt qualified arborist as well. It's very rigorous to do, and it's very ethical as well. And so it would be unordinary where we would disagree with someone who has so many qualifications.
Questions? Anybody else? Did you get all the information that you were looking for?
Yeah, easy
Well,
peasy.
And the next steps would finish up the policy, and then we'll bring it back.
Correct.
And I guess ultimately we're looking at so we can implement this with the budgeting process
Correct.
for this year.
Correct, yeah. So once this is done, I believe the next step would be during the budgeting process to have council allocate funds to these specific line items.
Okay.
One last question, sorry. Can people only apply once it's set up going forward, or if they did treatment this year, could they try to apply if they just got it done?
The way it's set up is it's not retroactive.
Okay.
Reimbursement would be, or applications would be accepted up to 30 days after treatment.
Okay.
Correct, it is a reimbursement process. Anything else?
Anybody else?
Okay.
Thanks, Kelsey.
All right, thank you.
All right, Christina.
The next workshop item we have is the Planning and Zoning Commission Rules of Procedure. And we're looking at a change. Christina?
making sure this work. Good evening, Council. Christina Pachoka. I'm sorry. I have to take my hearing aids. I have a new system set up that the sound is going through the Bluetooth, but I'm getting echo. I can hear myself speak seconds after. Christina Pachocchio, the City Secretary. Tonight I'm here to speak to you regarding the Planning and Zoning Commission's Rules of Procedure, specifically Rule 2.2. At the March 21st council meeting, Councilmember Kerner requested that we bring this item back because she wanted to have us do some research on the language that was in Rule 2.2, specifically the language that addresses real property owners. I was able to look at some of our documentation. The language originated from the ordinance from 2018-03, and the language states that the citizen, let me lower this so you can see, that the members will serve at the will of City Council and shall be resident citizens, real property owners, and qualified voters of the City of Fair Oaks Ranch. The rules of procedure basically echoes that language. It's not in our UDC, it's not in our city charter. I'm not sure exactly of the origin of the language, but it has been in those two documents within the city. I did hand out a paper. I was able to reach out to some of the other cities in the city secretary chapter. And I do have a spreadsheet that identifies the various qualifications, and it ranges significantly from city to city. The first four, I believe, cities, ours, Eagle Pass, Seguin, Sandy Oaks, all require real property ownership. But then it also runs the gamut of whether or not you have to be a resident, what your voting status is, and then they have additional miscellaneous qualifications. There is nothing that is required from our Texas Local Government Code, so it's basically what the individual city wants to put in. Yes, ma'am?
Have we looked at our
sorry, let me put
actual
this-
members and decided if they're all owners?
I'm sorry. This is going to be a challenge.
Okay.
I apologize. This is the first time the process has sort of worked with the sound coming into my hearing aids, so we haven't had a test with me speaking. Okay, if you don't mind repeating yourself.
Have we looked at our actual P&Z members and seen if they're owners versus what they are?
They are owners.
They're all owners.
Yes, ma'am.
How did you confirm that?
By their address.
Well, that doesn't prove that they own the property.
Correct. They could live there but not necessarily own it. So I guess that's my question. We're diving into ownership versus renting, and I'm not saying one's better than the other, but did we dive into that?
No.
So I appreciate you doing the research, because really my one original concern was there was something in the rules that didn't match the ordinance. So it sounds like the rules in the ordinance match, but I have a problem with it being in either, for multiple reasons. One, if we have that requirement in there, that means that you are then required to confirm that. That's not an easy task, because you can't just say, if I live at a residence, I own it. Fair Oaks Ranch has a lot of multi-generational families. My mother lives with me. Technically, she could not be on P&Z because she does not own my house, right? And so there's multiple people across the city that have situations like that. And I don't want to exclude residents of our city from serving on a committee just because they don't happen to own that house or whatever the property is. So I personally think it should be removed. I don't know why it was on there, probably, I was one of the few that was here that voted on it originally, so mea culpa, I didn't even catch it then. So, but I'm glad I caught it in this review, because I personally would like to see it removed. I mean, that's just my personal opinion, but I appreciate you doing the research on that.
And I am happy to remove it at your request or council decision.
It would require an ordinance change and then the
Yes.
policy change, but, and the rules change, but
Yes.
I don't know what other people think about that.
Yeah, Christina, I believe this is the only committee that we had this, this excerpt to be a real property owner in.
I do believe so.
Yep. And along the same lines as Laura, I believe it was probably, well, we'll never know, but it probably had something to do with ownership and being a part of the P&Z and maybe some commitment because you are a property owner in Fair Oaks Ranch. I like the example that Laura used about her mother living there. I also looked at it, because what we're really talking about is, one, it was renters. You could have renters and they could be living in the city and they could be great residents. The other thing is, you know, what proves ownership of a property? Some properties are owned by LLCs. So where do we cross the gray
Or
line?
the estate of.
Right.
People put things into their trusts, their family trusts. Well, then now it's not owned by a person.
So then I think we're getting into a gray line of how we determine ownership, and I don't know that that's really the intent of what it wanted to get to. And I think the backstop from all of this is that City Council interviews all of the individuals that are going to be put onto a committee, and so we have that opportunity to really determine who are the best individuals to serve our city as part of the P&Z. So I think that provides a backstop for us to ensure that we get it right, while we could remove this language from the rules of procedure and the ordinance.
Do we have an issue now that we're trying to solve, or is this a solution looking for a problem?
The issue is I feel this is discriminatory and I want it out of the ordinance, that's why. And it's preventing people from applying, and it's almost it would add additional work for Christina to validate if we wanted to enforce our own ordinance. I don't know if we've ever checked this for anyone that's ever been on P&Z.
How do we know that it's preventing people?
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity.
It could.
It could, I get that, but you said it is preventing people, so it seems like that was a direct. And so I'm just curious if you have firsthand experience that it prevented somebody that's maybe a friend or whatever,
No,
which is
no,
fine.
I don't. But I'm saying is if somebody read the ordinance,
could.
they
I
would
get it.
never apply.
Correct. I get that. No, I understand it could. I just was trying to understand if it did. Does that make sense?
So I have a suggestion. So, for example, when I went to college, was out of state, but my permanent residence stayed at my parents' house. And that's where I vote, right? That's where I voted. Why couldn't it be that? So, for example, like if your mom lives with you, she doesn't own the house, but her permanent residence is your house, is your address.
That's what I was saying. It already says resident citizen. I just want to remove real property owner.
Right. I wouldn't have a problem with that. My problem is if somebody isn't intending to be there or really doesn't have an interest in that location necessarily, I don't want them to be able to be making decisions on behalf of people who do.
That's why we interview them.
Right. So, but that, I mean, that's a legitimate concern.
So right now, y'all, just to understand, and everybody understand, the bar is higher to serve on P&Z than to run for city council.
Right.
Right, that's
It's
just-
not even a
just to be
requirement
clear.
to own real property to be on city council.
To be clear, I don't have a preference on ownership necessarily. I just have a preference on somebody who has a legitimate interest in the community.
I don't think anyone was arguing against that. My portion of bringing this up is, one, Was the rules inconsistent with the ordinance? It isn't. I intend to submit a revision to this ordinance, and you feel free to comment on it at that time.
Is there anybody that has a concern with removing the language that you be a real property owner?
I'd want to know what we're changing it to exactly.
All we'd be
I don't
doing,
have a problem removing real property owner per se. I just want to know what we're going to put it at.
I'll be glad to show it to you when I put it on the agenda.
Sounds bueno.
my understanding will just be removing
Just removing those three words.
real property owners. So
We'll
it'd
just
be,
remove those three
members
words.
serve at the will of the city council and shall be residents, citizens, and qualified voters of the city of Fair Oaks Ranch.
Yeah, so this line right here.
It says it right there. It's already
on
in
the screen.
ordinance.
We'll just remove that. Shall be real property owners.
Yeah. So
The
you just
rest
pull that
can
out,
stay.
And we're going to, yeah, I'm okay with that.
So I'll,
Regardless, I'm sending it through for an ordinance for change, so.
What if I vote no?
And so with that,
Okay.
then, we need to change the ordinance first, and then we'll come back after that and change the rules.
we can probably do both at the same time.
Yeah.
So I'll work on that and bring it back to you.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thanks, Christina. And the last workshop that we have tonight is the Unified Development Code Policy Amendments for prioritized categories 1 through 7. Lee?
And I'll kick it off while the league gets settled there. So as council is fully aware, we adopted a revised UDC with the administrative and statutory changes that was finalized in early January, I think the first meeting in January of this year. We've provided to you a couple of updates on the Planning and Zoning Commission's process for the policy amendments that started early this year. So tonight, we're going to present the first set of these proposed amendments for policy amendments for discussion. The commission, has worked on these since January to narrow down the options, where we start with 7 broad categories where they first looked. We narrowed it down to 13 individual changes for your review tonight. So Lee will go through those in just a second. Some of these changes are staff-driven with P&Z concurrence as they relate to things, largely housekeeping, like restoring standards from the old subdivision ordinance that we're missing. Other references talk about incorporating our existing standards manuals for engineering and other items into the UDC, or specifying that require permits for specific improvements, sanitary sewer, et cetera. And there are 3 or 4 items that are listed on your cover sheet that we consider administrative because they're removing obsolete language, or they're moving language from one section of the code to another, or in some cases are just obsolete. Those references, the administrative items are in blue on your attachment if you're following on the red line. I think most of these items that Lee goes through will be considered routine. There may be a few that you do have questions about as we go through them. So for this set, this represents the final P&Z recommendation on these items. So from council tonight, we're looking for your direction either to accept the changes or reject them, or as needed, send certain ones back to staff for further review. We don't necessarily need finality, easy for me to say, on all the items tonight. So in the interest of time, we're looking for your direction on which items we can put to bed, so to speak, or leave out altogether, or send back for more work. Eventually, these changes will be incorporated into a public, the next public hearing on the UDC. I expect we would not see that for at least a couple of months, depending on the direction you give us tonight. But for now, we just want to turn over these items, get your relatively quick review. Are we good where we're at? Do we need to look at it more? And we'll take it from there. So with that, I think I can turn it over to Lee, or if you have comments, Mr. Mayor.
Just a quick, as we look at each of these individual items, we can accept it. And with that, it would go into the bin for a consideration item to come forward for updates to the UDC at a future time.
With the public
And
hearing, yes.
Right, and we may have several of these that would accumulate over time We could also, at this time, modify, if council chose and looked at it and said, I like the language, but there's one piece I want to modify. We all agreed with that, agree on the modification. We can move that into the bin for future approval. If there's one that we just don't have enough information on, then we would say we'd like to return that one to get additional information. Or if there's one that we just totally disagree with, we just say, hey, we don't want to address that one.
Exactly right.
Okay?
I have an administrative question.
All right.
So I'm reading Exhibit A and B. I just want to make sure as we're talking, I'm following along. I see in the consideration thing, there's 4 staff recommended administrative policy changes, but I don't see those in Exhibit A in the table. Are they in Exhibit B, and what color are they?
They will be blue.
Blue. So there's some blue that are just grammatical changes. There's some blue that are, just reorganization, and there's some blue that are staff recommended administrative policy changes.
Correct.
True.
Okay,
Because we're
just
talking
want to
about-
make
yeah,
sure I'm
yes,
reading
yes,
this right.
That is
So
correct.
anything in blue is staff or grammatical or reorganization.
Referencing a
and-
license, yeah.
And everything in red is something that is in the
Exhibit
Exhibit A.
Correct.
Okay, and then just one other thing is, are we expecting another, I hate this word, tranche of recommendations after this? Or whatever we decide here, will that go back and be in the first version of the UDC we get for public hearing? Or will there be more coming our way?
There will be more coming your way, but next on your list, and I get this far, next on your list will probably be the residential component of mixed use we talked about before, after this.
So
And then-
if we move forward with these categories, like say we pick which ones we want to go forward with, will that then be incorporated in a version that is adopted and discussed, and then the next group would come in the next version? Or you're looking to do multiple conversations and have it all rolled into the UDC?
I was thinking multiple, but not in totality. So we have this set now. The only other one that P&Z has looked at so far is that mixed-use one that I just referenced. After we talk about that one, the intent is to come back to council with the remaining categories for you to ask, hey, do you even want to look at this before P&Z? So in short, this is as far as P&Z has gotten.
Right, I think my question is I also don't want to see another UDC version that has 100,000 changes on it. I mean, I would rather us say, we're going to make a revision in June. What are we going to fit in that June? And then we're going to make a revision the next June. What are we going to fit in that? Because I don't want to keep on hearing, okay, once we say this, then, oh, now we have 15 more. Oh, now we have 20 more. And then
Right.
we don't do a revision for another year and a half, which is what happened last
Yeah,
year.
I don't expect to do them all at once in a hearing or revision, like you're saying. So we could do this, maybe the next one, probably schedule a hearing at that point, is
Okay,
what I was thinking.
So two
It's like,
groupings.
these are relatively small, I think. We'll have that mixed-use item coming up next, and I think at that point, we could bundle that, assuming we agree, into a revision.
Before we go into the details, are these prioritized categories that are in Exhibit A, are these truly what the P and Z thought were the most important things that need to get done right now? Because
Carol's
I
shaking
find
her
that
head.
curious. Okay. I find very curious that these are the absolute most important things that need to be
No,
fixed.
no, and that was discussed for you. They were not the most important or the most vital. They prioritize them in the event of, or the priority of expediency, the relatively easy hits that we could put to bed.
Okay. I'm ready to listen.
Okay. Good evening, Council. Lee Muniz, Manager of Engineering Services. I'll be going through each one of these line by line. Try to be as fast as I can. At any point in time, you have any sort of questions, or just go ahead and interrupt me at any time. Starting on page, what page are we on? We are page 57 of the council package. The first topic is cul-de-sacs. Currently, the UDC doesn't have any regulations regarding length or width of cul-de-sacs. which may create access issues for emergency services. The recommendation would be to add a requirement to comply with International Fire Code and American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials for cul-de-sac dimensions. The next topic is easement dedication requirements for utilities. The UDC previously did not incorporate regulations regarding utility easements, widths for single or multiple utilities. The amendment will incorporate the previous subdivision regulations for 15 feet for a single utility and 20 feet for multiple utilities.
You want to just go through all of these, or do you want to do them one at a time and just address it with any questions?
Either way, so we're intending to go through them all, but, you know, Lee is pausing briefly. If there's one you want to address, stop us.
You could just yell stop too, because
Are there, like, what are
Yeah,
the ones we
throw
have
something.
issues with? I mean, do we need to go through every single one, or can we just identify the ones we have issues with?
Well, I think,
How about if we just start off with, you presented the first one, and are there any concerns or questions about the dimensions of cul-de-sac and how he's laid out a process as part of the UDC for addressing this?
I have a question. So are any of these, would these be, any of these, and specifically this one, be applicable to existing, or are we talking about new developments?
New or redevelopment, yeah, so.
New, or what was that?
Or in the
Redevelopment.
rare case
Okay.
of a redevelopment.
Gotcha, thank you. That was easy.
Yes, ma'am.
does staff have any concerns with the P and Z recommendation on number 1?
No.
Okay,
Recommended language.
okay, thank you.
So with that, everyone's okay. We'll put this one in the bin for an update to the UDC. Okay?
Would
And
you like
this-
me to say the second one again?
No, I think we saw.
Okay.
Well, it was utility easements.
Correct.
Oh, and we didn't have anything right now that designates utility easements,
Correct.
but you pulled the language from our previous subdivision
Subdivision.
regulations,
Yes, sir.
and we're adding that.
And we're adding that into the UDC, which is the same language.
I'm sorry? Correct. I think all of these deal with future developments or redevelopments, is that correct?
Correct.
Correct.
And I'm going to ask the same question on every one of these. So staff thinks that this is enforceable and
Sorry.
have no concerns with this language?
Absolutely, yeah, we definitely want a minimum width for easements.
Good, okay.
Okay. Moving on. The next topic is for allowable construction on or within an easement. Once again, the UDC did not have limitations regarding construction over easements that can result in damage to utilities within the easement. The recommendation would include the same restrictions that were in the previous subdivision regulations for construction within the easement.
Staff does recommend.
Yeah, okay. So I thought we discussed this topic previously when we were talking about trees and whether people could remove trees that are in the easement. So no structure, vegetation, other than ground cover or equipment shall be placed within an easement. So they're saying no trees.
They should not be placed within
They'll
an
be
easement.
placed, so we don't want to plant new ones. If we have existing easements for drainage or other things, back to that ordinance, we don't require removal, but we don't want you putting new things on them.
And is this, it's caused problems in the past?
There
where
has
people
been-
put something up and then all of a sudden we can't get to a utility?
Depending on the type of tree, but root growth could impact utilities underground, depending on how big of a tree it is. It does impact drainage infrastructure as well too. Anytime you have any sort of root growth where it's an earthen channel, the water will start going around the roots, causing erosion issues, expanding the channel outward, outside of the easement.
That was my concern. when we did that before was that we were allowing people to plant in easements and drainage areas that, any trees. And I don't think it's a good thing because stuff like this happens where it pulls up the pipes and all the things. So I think we should be consistent, personally.
Thank you.
Any concerns with the language as presented? Okay.
Subdivision easements, and now we are, and the next topic is for vegetation encroachment restrictions to overhang utilities. The UDC does not have easement restrictions regarding height and width of vegetation near an easement that could result in damage to overhead utility lines. The recommendation would be to include the overhang requirements based on the previous subdivision ordinance for 10 feet high and 6 feet wide in addition to the easement width.
That was in our previous subdivision ordinance. It
Yes,
just
ma'am.
for some reason didn't make it into the,
Correct.
Correct.
yeah.
Chesley, do you have a concern or? Okay. All right.
Okay. The next topic is shrub spacing requirements for screening between residential and non-residential properties. The UDC currently has a large minimum shrub spacing distance that will create long time periods for screening to fill in. The recommendation would be to reduce the minimum shrub spacing distance from 6 feet to 3 feet so that the time to create a full vegetative screening is significantly reduced. And that one is this one.
I had questions on this initially when I read through it. And so what does the 6-foot minimum spacing? It's a limitation, really. They can be no closer than 3 feet is what
Yes, 3 feet
But
is
we
correct.
had 6
6
feet in
feet.
there.
No,
Well, we
can
have
be-
6 feet in there.
It cannot, the spacing from stem to stem, it cannot be closer than 6 feet
That's what's currently in the.
currently in the UDC.
This
And
is
we wanna move it
specifically
to-
for screening between residential and commercial areas, and,
Right.
and our code, our existing code that goes back at least to 2019, perhaps prior, requires that. And if you read the red line, the existing language says that it's evergreen shrubbery that starts out 18 inches, supposed to grow up to, I believe, 3 to 5 feet within 3 years. And the existing language, for whatever, says that you can be no closer than 6 feet between plantings, so we're actually allowing more flexibility. If you want to plant more, by all means, and the idea was to make it 3, because you still want enough so that the vegetation will grow, but this allows to plant closer if you so desire, but it's not required, so it's providing, I think, more flexibility in that instance.
Kind of gets to my question at the beginning. Is this truly the most important thing that we need to be fixing right now? I mean, how many shrubberies do we have that are too far apart, right? I mean, so it's just really interesting. I mean, it's not saying it's wrong and I don't agree with it. It just seems like not the most important thing for us to be worrying about right now. But that's,
And I got it.
yeah.
But this is what has been presented.
know.
The research has been done on it. I just had a question, do we really need a minimum distance? But we had 6 feet, and it makes it more flexible if we drop that down to 3 feet. And I'm okay with the 3 feet.
And I will say, agree with that, and in deference to the commission as well, that as we know from the previous round, there are certainly some more high-profile issues you're coming this way. The council wanted to discuss in many of those instances whether or not to proceed with work, so that's forthcoming. So I think in their work, they looked at the,
Different issue, but yes, agree.
And just to let you know that this one was part of the landscape category, which was ranked number 7 out of the 1 through 7. So this is the lower end of the 7. And you can see here that we have the categories listed in the topic under landscaping.
Is everyone okay with
Yep.
lowering the minimal distance to 3 feet?
Sure. Yep.
Okay. Next topic is vehicle queuing requirements for drive-in facilities. There are no queuing requirements for drive-in facilities that may cause car stacking to impede traffic along adjacent roads. The recommendation would be to implement vehicle queuing requirements based on the Institute of Traffic Engineers Trip Generation Manual. The manual does not include trip generations for gas pumps, therefore, it was recommended that 2 stacking spaces would adequately accommodate future gas pump stations.
I don't think I know enough about this to recommend this one. I don't know how many more places in the city we even allow drive-ins that aren't already built. I don't know if the ones that are currently there even meet this requirement, so, I mean,
It would be applicable potentially in our mixed-use zones in the city, of which we have at least 3 currently.
the one that's one at the corner of, over here. That's a
One,
mixed use.
yeah.
Yes, that's one of them. There's an additional one off of Detail Corner as well.
Well, I do like that Lee has taken it and he's tied it to a regulation.
Yep, I like
And so
that.
as the regulation changes, I think in this, the regulation didn't cover stacking spaces at gas pumps.
Correct.
And so as part of that, you're recommending that they have a stacking area to allow for 2 cars to wait to get into the gas pump.
Correct, which is a minimum stacking requirement, therefore, they could have additional stacking spaces if they need at the point of when they're calculating it. It's just that they cannot go any less than 2 stacking spaces per gas pump.
And when we're talking about stacking spaces, it's really the area needed to get the vehicles off the roadway or out of the parking areas.
It's areas designated where cars are waiting in a queue to get a service. So in this case, for a gas pump, you do not count the person gassing up. It's the 2 cars behind you. Those would be considered the 2 stacking spaces waiting to use the gas pump.
And to be clear, the UDC does currently have a code for drive-in or drive-through facilities, so the requirement itself is not new. The proposed change is to tie it, specifically to the ITE manual, as Lee did, and not just say, as it says now, provide adequate spaces. This is
Correct.
attempting to define what's adequate.
Any concerns?
All right. The next topic is residential privacy screening requirements for drive-in facilities. The UDC does not have requirements for screening of drive-in facilities when facing a residential lot. This could reduce the privacy or create noise and light pollution to the adjacent residential lot. The recommendation would be to require a 25-foot landscape buffer.
Yeah, so in this, we're not changing setbacks or property requirements. It's within the lot line that separates the residential from the commercial.
Correct.
This requires that a 25-foot buffer
Yes, sir.
be put in to
Anytime-
separate.
Correct. Anytime you have a drive-in facility that fronts a residential lot. So
Okay.
if you have the drive-in facility adjacent to a residential lot, they'll have the 25-foot buffer.
So, I just trying to make sure I understood, when you say 25 foot, are you talking about, here's the lot line, here's the residential property, here's the drive, like, I don't know, to get donuts, whatever. 25 feet this way, or 25 feet this way?
The horizontal distance from the
Horizontal distance.
property line to the drive-in facility.
So it is essentially a setback.
Correct, similar.
It's requiring 25 feet away from the residential lot line.
Yes.
So we are making a setback requirement.
I understood this to be a buffer. I thought it was a buffer length
No, it's a
along the lot line, but you're saying it's got to be 20 feet, 5 feet wide?
Do we even have any properties that are going to be affected by this? No? I mean, I can't think of one.
I guess that's the other question that I had for anything that's commercial currently. If they change something at a drive-through, let's pretend, then they would be, I would assume they would not be grandfathered in. So we're going to be imposing this on those, and then think about just, I mean, I think about,
But when you say those, are there any? Like, there's not any.
we have
The
commercial.
donuts, the donut drive-through.
Okay,
Well,
but
we-
but
we
there's
do
not
have
any
commercial, so I
residential
guess
near
that's my-
that.
I guess that's my question in all of this is,
Crossbank.
if we approve this, and then we have a commercial resident that's already established, and they want to make some changes, right?
Correct.
So then they would be held to these new standards with their changes.
Assuming,
Under this,
and
Parker's wouldn't
assuming
exist,
they're-
right?
Yes, correct. And that's where I'm going with this. I think that's a concern to me.
But Parker's doesn't have a
The drive-through?
drive-through. There's no area for them to have a drive-through. So I don't know why we're even
No.
concerned about
I guess
this.
I'm looking.
What is drive-in versus drive-through?
Yeah, drive-in versus drive-through.
The same thing?
Yes.
It is.
Okay.
So I guess that's the thing. My
Or
question.
drive up? Like, I mean,
Drive up
Like
the
everyone,
same as
like
drive in
it's
as in
it's not,
drive-through.
that is not what Parker's is. That is not what Spotted Deer is.
no, that's,
Drive up.
It is not. It is, under that definition is not. I think we're wasting our efforts on this.
I don't,
I'm good with it. It will never be a problem.
Yeah, let's move forward.
Well, I mean,
Again, a lot of the
Trying to
UDC
understand.
is
Why?
future looking by definition. You know, where you look at what, if a development,
Right,
in
but
this
we
case,
don't
we're
ha-
talking about
But where do we have that would possibly be affected by this? That's commercial.
potentially.
Right.
yes,
I understand that, but there's like one place, right? Maybe over here by Fisher's where where it's next to the arbors, maybe.
or the Old Fred Road.
A small portion of the enclave and I-10. I-10 wouldn't be residential, wouldn't abut residential probably, but those are your mixed-use areas.
Right.
There's small potential for, out there that it could happen within the city. And possibility that it could. What I'm looking at is, I just didn't realize a 25-foot wide buffer, that just seems,
How wide is this room?
I'm not in favor of this
Pretty
one. I'm going to say that
extensive.
now.
do what?
I'm not in favor of this one.
I do have a question. Where did the 25 feet come from?
the
Yeah.
25-foot was based off of, I don't have that on me right now. I don't recall what the 25 was based on. I believe it was, do you remember, Grant, what the 25-foot base? I don't have that information, but I can get that to you.
Why don't we
25 off the
I'm
top of
take
my
this one
head.
back and
Yeah.
come back with,
That's fine.
all right.
Yeah. More questions? than-
All right, the next one. The next topic is parking lot setback along arterial and non-arterial streets. The UDC currently has a minimum setback requirements for parking lots fronting non-arterial and arterial roads, which will limit the amount of space for landscaping. The proposed amendments will increase the required setback distance from 10 to 35 feet for non-arterial and 15 to 40 feet for arterial roads in order to meet a hill country atmosphere and is similar to requirements of surrounding communities.
How similar? Like, does the city of Bernie have 35, 40 feet, or is it?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
35 to 40.
On arterial roads?
It is dependent on the zoning.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is it's not the same.
But they do
I mean, the
have it
number
s-
is the same, but we're applying it to many more roads.
Correct.
Can you, what are the arterial
art-
roads? What are-
I-10 and
Oh, God,
Ralph
no.
Fair Road.
So that's where you want the parking, right, when you pull off the road. Why do you need to drive half a mile to get to a parking spot when you drive off of I-10? I don't understand that.
Agree. I agree. I would rather have the parking along that road as opposed to
Yeah.
further into our community.
And I think, to be honest, having landscaping there prevents people from even seeing that there's a business there. And I want to know what business is there on the frontage road because I want to know where I'm going.
Yeah,
This was just an issue, as I recall,
The woodlands.
not too long ago.
Can't see them.
right.
Along
And we gave,
I-10.
didn't we give a variance to
We did.
somebody who came and asked because this was too much with the old way?
Right.
And now we're making it more?
I don't like
This
this
is a big
one.
no for me.
And Lee, are there any challenges that we see with staying with the 10 and 15 feet?
For the challenges for moving from, or for leaving the 10 to 15, it's really just to meet additional requirements for the hill country atmosphere.
Right. I don't,
No, we're good.
leave that one alone.
All right.
So my understanding from this as a council, what we're saying is we do not want to address this one.
Right.
Leave it at 10 and 15.
Yep.
Any concerns, Scott, or,
Basically, no.
okay?
All right, so the next topic is about minimum square footage for parking lot landscape islands. The UDC currently does not provide a minimum square footage requirement for parking lot landscape islands, which could constrict the vegetation root growth area needed for survival. The recommended amendment would require a minimum square footage of 60 square feet, which is recommended by the Texas A&M Planting Guide.
We're chasing a problem.
Yeah, this is,
I think this one's similar to the other one. I think, I
that's
don't think we
weird.
mess with it.
Yeah.
so now we're requiring a 60-foot island in the middle of a parking lot
Right.
because the landscaping
Well,
will
it's
die.
60 square feet.
60
so-
square foot.
And that's if you have an island. So,
Correct.
again, landscaped islands is an existing provision in the code. So it does talk about landscaped islands. The only thing this is adding is requiring the 60 feet so that landscaped islands actually grow. But the existence of the rest of the language is already in the
Problem to
code.
deal with. No,
Leave it.
no, yeah.
So my understanding from this is we do not want to address it. Provides a minimum, does not provide a minimum size for this. Okay,
All right.
This one's a no for the same reason the other
Yeah,
one was a
I
no.
was gonna say, this is the same thing that we just dealt with.
Correct. This is for Ralph Fair Road.
Nope.
No,
well, if we've already said we're going to stay with the lower amount.
It was
Right.
intended to be consistent, so yes,
Correct.
this would be the
Right.
same
Okay.
item.
Okay. The next topic is requiring city issue permits for public infrastructure. The UDC currently does not require city permits to be pulled for construction of public infrastructure, which could lead to inspectors not catching errors in construction process. The proposed amendment will require permits to be pulled for any construction of public infrastructure.
Staff recommended.
I'm okay with that.
this makes sense.
Any concerns?
Concerned that we don't have them do permits now.
Right. Yeah.
I mean.
We do
They do,
inspections.
but don't reference it in the UDC.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. The next topic, we'll discuss the requirements for street-based depth and material types. The required depth and types of street-based material required by the UDC is not adequate to maintain the longevity of streets. This could lead to multiple costly maintenance issues. The recommended amendment will increase the base material from a minimum of 8 inches to 10 inches and specify the type and grade of base to be used that meets the TxDOT standard specifications for construction of highways, streets, and bridges.
Yeah. I mean,
Is staff good with all those?
Yes, this was a
Specifics.
staff
Yes.
recommendation. Yes, ma'am. Okay. And the last topic will address the stormwater design criteria based on street designation. The current UDC only recognizes arterial, collector, and residential streets for stormwater design criteria, but there is no design criteria for local and connector streets as per the transportation maps. The proposed revision will add connector designated streets to collector category, which requires a 25-year storm, and local streets to the residential category, which requires a 10-year storm design criteria.
So in other words, we have standards for arterials and what's called residential streets. We also have collector and local streets in our transportation plan, and those weren't listed in the UDC. So we're adding those categories under the existing. So we're adding those words essentially so that those types of streets are
They're
encompassed as
accounted
well.
covered. I get
Correct.
that. So how does the 25-year storm match up for whichever one you said it was for?
For the connector,
Connector, how does that match up to the rest of our streets? So the connector streets versus our main streets?
correct, like a connector street, I believe is Fair Oaks Parkway, I believe is a connector.
No, I think it's
No.
That's a
it's
collector.
it's a collector.
Yeah, collector.
So connectors are lower
Similar.
streets, and we're putting them at 25-year storm. So I guess I want to know how that 25 years compares to the other streets that are higher up, if you will.
So you're trying to, try to
The
understand.
arterials are 50, if that's what your question is. Or this would be arterials at 50, collectors and connectors at 25,
25-year,
and locals at 10.
10.
But we're not going to be building too many more connector roads, are we? I mean, I don't see any new ones on our transportation plan. This would be when we redo it, we would do it.
When we've had these recent storms, forgive me because I forget, they've been less than 25-year storms?
Yes, pretty much. We haven't had a significant
probably.
rain event.
Because we've had a lot where people have been stressed out that the landscaping that they have, which is rocks, is going across Fair Oaks Parkway and all these things, but that's what it's meant to do, right? So I guess my question is, if we put them at a 25-year storm, is that sufficient?
Oh, yes. Is that enough? Yes, that is a 25-year storm is a very significant storm.
Yes.
I think we've had one in the 10 years that I've been here, so.
It's hard to base a 25-year storm without designating the drainage area draining to that point. Because if you have a large enough drainage area, the 25-year actually could exceed any sort of infrastructure you have. But the point is having a 25-year designated for that would be determined based on the drainage area flowing to there. So then they wouldn't have to design to a 50-year storm, they would do a 25-year storm. That would be the requirement.
That answer your questions? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Are there any of the roads that we are currently planning to reconstruct or fix that will now will be impacted by us doing this? So say when we redo Rolling Acres or Dietz Elkhorn, will we now have to add additional drainage that we didn't originally plan for because it's now being changed?
Good question.
I don't believe so, but Grant, do you have?
That's the tough question sometimes. Here we go.
No, just we're going to evaluate all of the different options of what it takes and what it costs to convey a 25-year storm, a 10 or a 5, and again, during that planning and design process, we'll present those options and costs to you to make a decision.
How about the 4 that are going for the bond?
There will be a decision that needs to be made on 2 of them. Rolling Acres Trail.
But
and
we've
Avenue,
already
yes.
seen those proposals and based our bond number off of that, so.
But
But-
remember that bond is, there's road bond and
Oh,
then there's drainage bond. So we
right.
can
The
actually.
Drainage is more certificate of, yeah.
Right, So we have a method to
Approving a
account for
drainage
that.
bond.
I think, Grant, what you're talking about is actually in the design of the road itself that would have to meet a 25-year storm capability. Is that,
Correct, that's what we're talking about here, we're considering. But often that's,
So what do we currently have to have for the road bonds? So let's talk Ammon Road and Rolling Acres.
we
What do they
have-
currently need to be?
What do you mean, what are they
10 year?
currently?
25, 10
Are they
year.
25-year, are they 10-year, are they 15-year, what are
So-
they?
yeah, Ammon Road is a
Currently.
collector road, it should convey the 25-year storm.
Okay, and what about Rolling Acres?
Rolling Acres Trail is a connector street, which is not classified right now.
Okay, so if we change this, what will they have to be?
It would be a 25-year storm as proposed in this amendment.
For both?
Yes.
Okay, so there's no change to Ammon, and then we add something to Rolling Acres, if you want to call it that.
Correct.
So from what you presented to us as the estimated cost, when we determined, no, for Rolling Acres, did you design it for 25-year when you presented the cost for our street bond?
So we haven't designed anything yet, just
Or
we have
what-
planning estimates, but,
Created your planning estimate, did you take into account 25-year?
so there's a wide range of that low water crossing from just putting a halt system down there to conveying the 10 or the 25-year storm, and it's from
And we did the
200,000 to
halt.
2 million, so.
Right. We did the
We didn't
halt.
make a decision on what we're doing on that low water crossing yet.
but I guess the question is, if we approve this,
Right.
then we're going to be required to meet the 25-year storm capability. So that means
Is it gonna cost
the
more
halt
money?
system would not be feasible. We would have to figure out something that, am I missing? So I think that's where the questions are coming from.
The Holt system should be based on the 100-year storm because that's the floodplain width. So the Holt system will prevent them from the flooding of the 100-year flood.
So I think the better
rather than the
question is
25-year
if we
because
approve
of the
this
floodplain.
today, how does it change what you guys have already given us in our estimates for these future road bonds,
If anything.
if any? Does it change it? Does it increase it? Does it decrease it? Or is it the same?
Yeah, I don't think it changes it. We're still going to look at the different options and bring that back to you during the design process.
And there'd still be enough money allocated within that up to 16 million to account for whatever
Or
it
the
is you
road-
come back
yes,
with.
Correct.
Okay.
Keith?
So, I want to make sure I understand this correctly. So these are existing streets. We're not putting in a new street. I'm assuming this would be for a new street. So that we're repairing an existing street, would we have to comply with this for the existing streets?
Yes, sir.
This is
Because
a
it's a-
repair, not a new.
It's a
Right.
reconstruction, it's not a
Reconstruction.
repair.
Do we say that?
Reconstruction is a new street.
It's a requirement
Yes.
for all public streets.
Right, I understand that, and I understand going forward, but does our UDC specifically spell out reconstruction? If it doesn't, we need to be sure we catch
And
that.
strictly speaking, the language under that section says new or redevelopment of land,
Redevelopment. Redevelopment.
not the street itself, but I take the question, though. I don't think it would necessarily apply, but nonetheless, we can provide clarity on what those design standards actually would be. We don't have to approve it tonight. Again, I don't believe reconstruction of or redesign, rather, of the street itself would be required, but we can look at it as if it was.
That's
if
why I
that makes
brought it
sense.
up, because that gives, in the design of the roads, that gives the flexibility to us, because we're not putting in a new road, and if it doesn't meet it doesn't meet the strict definition, that gives us the flexibility to lay out what we want, if that's the way it is worded. So that's why I think we should check that out.
Something
Right.
to look at.
So it says new redevelopment of land, in the language in there, you can read it, so, new and/or redevelopment of land that drains to a street, et cetera, et cetera. And then it talks about where the crossings are, these may be bridges, culverts, or underground systems, and that's what we're looking at as part of those two roads, Rolling Acres and Ammon, with respect to the low water crossings. And like Grant said, we haven't made that decision yet. The GO bond, as the council said, authority was purposely intended to provide that flexibility if we need either less or more options, but again, we haven't made that decision yet.
So say we happen to widen a shoulder of a road into land that was not previously developed. Is that considered developing on a land?
I would.
But what I'm saying is,
Just
we're
need
not,
to check it out,
just
so.
doing the same footprint. We're actually taking land that wasn't impervious and making it impervious now, right? And changing the flow of drainage by extending shoulders. Why wouldn't it apply to us? And if we don't apply it to us, and then someone else comes along and we try to apply it to them, they're like, well, you didn't apply it to yourself. So I just want to make sure we're super consistent.
Is there a definition? I think we should look and see.
Uh,
Is
so-
there a definition on
But what we've
development?
done is we've added, what was it, connector
And local.
And local
and
streets.
local. Does anybody have any issue with the addition? Take away the bond and what we're talking about here, but just adding that language to the UDC.
I think it needs to be cleaned up, and I want to do that. I just want to make sure I understand the implications to our own projects.
Right. I'm
Yeah.
getting to that.
Yeah, I like
And
I
so-
like how we're doing it. That's not the
So
problem.
I think we're okay with the language.
Yes.
Could we just take a look at it and see how it impacts the road reconstruction and bring it back?
Agree. And I think we should look at definitions too.
That was my question right there.
Definitions in,
Yeah,
What is new, right?
right.
all right, okay. Right. I think it's all the same.
Got it.
Okay.
With
Oh. Wes, do you have a question? Or a statement?
Not anymore.
Okay.
Yep.
What would this mean for not just the current ones, the Hammond and Rolling Acres? The whole issue of what our comprehensive plan says and requires on existing roads, that's still, in my mind, never been drilled down to and clarified.
Okay. Good point. Lee, anything else as part of?
That's the end of that's the last one. So that's all I have, unless you have additional questions.
Okay. Well, that completes the workshop items that we had on the agenda for tonight. From here, we'll move on to announcements. Did any council member have any announcement that they'd like to make?
Have that one, hang on.
I have one. I would like to congratulate the Seton Hall Pirates on their win for the NIT championship. Go Hall.
NIT?
Thank you very much. Okay, that's all I have.
I was asked to remind everybody that this Saturday, Forha, along with GVT sponsorship, is having their annual Shred Day at the Fair Oaks Ranch Elementary School from 9 to 12. And members can bring up to 4 kitchen plastic-sized bags to the event.
Anybody else?
I was at there, it was written down.
I have one announcement for tonight. We do have a town hall meeting coming up next Tuesday, April 9th, 6:30 p.m. It'll be at the Spring Creek United Methodist Church. The town hall meeting is really set up to cover 2 topics as part of the meeting, and both are the items that will be voted on during the May election. First is information to reauthorize the 1/4 cent from the sales and use tax to be used for city and street maintenance and repairs. And the second item is information on the Ford Road reconstruction projects that will make up the general obligation bond. Both of these will be discussed, presented with information at the town hall meeting. The purpose of the town hall meeting is to provide needed information to residents in order to make an informed decision when voting on these items on May 4th. Come out and join us at the town hall meeting, please. Scott.
One other announcement, Mr. Mayor. The city just learned just a few days ago this week that the city of Fair Oaks Ranch has been designated as Tree City USA by the Arbor Day Foundation.
Nice.
I'd like to say that we planned all this with Kelsey's presentation, but we didn't. But it's fortuitous that she came with that tonight. So this Arbor Day happens to be on April 26th. That's coming up. So be on the lookouts for forthcoming announcements on a modest ceremony regarding both that day and specifically our first designation as a Tree City USA. And that'll be on April 26th. More details to come.
Exciting.
That's it?
That's it.
Does any council member have any items that they would like added to a future agenda? And no requirement to go into executive session tonight?
No, sir.
Dan was just looking for a reason to stick around a little longer, or?
I'm trying.
Minutes.
All right. Christina, anything that we missed or we need to trail back on as part of the meeting?
No, sir.
Scott, anything from your
That's all for me.
perspective? Council at the time now is 8:27. We are adjourned. Got 8:30?
I'm divorced finally.
Oh.
It took a year and 4 months, but I